Upon the death of War Master Horus and the collapse of his insurrection, the Loyalist Space Marine legions were reorganized into smaller chapters to prevent any individual from wielding such vast power over the Space Marines again. Rogal Dorn initially resisted the division of his legion, though he ultimately acquiesced to the consensus of his fellow Primarchs. Consequently, the legion was fragmented into numerous chapters. One preserved the name Imperial Fists, while the others adopted new names and heraldry, poised to carve new legacies within Imperial history. This significant restructuring led to the creation of a new echelon of Adeptus Astartes in an event that became known as the Second Founding. The initial warriors to fill the ranks of the newly formed chapters were the very Space Marines who had once fought alongside their Primarch during the chaotic era of the Horus heresy. Each successor chapter was bestowed with a symbol of their sacred mission, personally gifted by Rogal Dorn, ensuring they would forever remember that his spirit remained with them and that his glory was also theirs. The Soul Drinkers believed to have emerged during the Second Founding from the former personal guard of the Imperial Fists, first Captain Sigismund, himself the first High Marshal of the Black Templars, and from the remaining fleet-based shock assault units of the 7th Legion. The Soul Drinkers were gifted the Soul Spear. As the Primarch of the Imperial Fists, Dorn was renowned for his unyielding resolve, tactical genius, and mastery of fortifications. He played a crucial role during the Great Crusade and the Horus heresy, particularly in the defense of Terra against the traitor legions. Known for his stern demeanor and unwavering loyalty to the Emperor, Dorn's legacy is marked by his dedication to the Imperium and his embodiment of the virtues of strength, duty, and sacrifice. During the Great Crusade, Dorn was said to have discovered the Soul Spear on a desolate and forsaken chaos-tainted world. With it, he vanquished formidable warp beasts and hoisted his banner on 100 worlds reclaimed in the Emperor's honor. He is said to have bestowed it upon the Soul Drinkers as a symbol of their mission and a testament that, despite their division into distinct chapters, all successors of the Imperial Fists remained united in spirit and brotherhood. The Soul Spear is a formidable warp-based vortex weapon, capable of cleaving through nearly any material. Its blade, as long as a man's forearm, is a lustrous black adorned with intricate, shifting circuitry. The hilt features smooth indentations designed for fingers far larger than a typical human's, each equipped with a laser needle encircled by gene-sensitive psychoplastic. Chapter legends assert that only a scion of Rogal Dorn could unlock and wield the Soul Spear's power in battle. However, since the Soul Drinkers are not of Dorn's genetic lineage, the Soul Spear recognizes only the unique genetic signature of the Soul Drinkers themselves. This suggests that the mythology surrounding the relic might be unfounded, and its true origin remains obscure. For millennia, the chapter proudly bore this mighty relic into combat until it was lost in the 40th millennium, when their flagship, Sanctifier, vanished during a warp jump. During the assault on Terra during the Wars of Apostasy, also known as the Terran Crusade, High Marshal Sigenandus of the Black Templars proclaimed an imperial crusade against Terran High Lord Vandir on Terra. United in this endeavor, the Black Templars, alongside their progenitor chapter, the Imperial Fists, as well as the Soul Drinkers, the Fervent Firehawks, and contingents of the Martian Tech Guard, advanced to Terra and besieged Vandir's ecclesiarchal palace. The crusade culminated in Vandir's demise at the hands of his former bodyguard, Alicia Dominica, who would later be revered as the founding and patron imperial saint of the Adepta Sororitas. The Soul Spear would eventually be lost for thousands of Terran years as the Soul Drinkers' flagship the Sanctifier was lost to the warp, but eventually the Soul Spear was found in the collection of a decadent and corrupted antiquarian. These actions would eventually lead the Soul Drinkers be declared excommunicate traitoris by the Inquisition. The Soul Drinkers pledged to reclaim it for their chapter, a commitment that eventually led to a confrontation with the Adeptus Mechanicus. While the Mechanicus forces ostensibly supported the Adeptus Ministorum, their true intent was to seize the Soul Spear to study and potentially reverse-engineer its ancient technology. The Soul Drinkers, led by Captain Sarpedon, assaulted the Star Fort Laconia. The Laconia Star Fort served as the headquarters of the Van Scorvold cartel. Initially an orbital defense platform circling the planet Laconia, the station was acquired from the planet's planetary defense force by the Van Scorvold cartel. The cartel was the very same collector that had inadvertently acquired the Soul Spear, having no knowledge of its power or significance. A strike force of around 300 Soul Drinkers, led by Commander Kian, launched an assault on the Laconia Star Fort. During the attack, Kian was killed and passed command to Sarpedon, who discovered the Soul Spear within the fortress's vaults. However, as the Soul Drinkers moved to claim the spear, a group of Skitarii teleported onto the station from a Adeptus Mechanicus vessel. which had been part of the Administratum task force under the guise of support. The Skitarii seized the Soul Spear and retreated to their vessel. Archmagos Kobatov, commanding the Mechanicus forces, then deployed an artillery platform from his ship, threatening to obliterate the Star Fort if the Soul Drinkers did not withdraw. This standoff culminated in the destruction of the Mechanicus Star Fort Laconia and inflicted significant damage on several starships belonging to both the Adeptus Ministorum and Adeptus Mechanicus. The surviving Soul Drinkers withdrew to an asteroid field, only to be besieged by the combined fleets of the Inquisition and the Adeptus Ministorum. Their plight persisted until the arrival of the Soul Drinkers' fleet, led by Chapter Master Gorgolian, through Warp Route 931C, a passage that had been closed for 6 centuries prior to this. Following the union of the Soul Drinkers' chapter fleet with the survivors of the assault on the Star Fort, Chapter Master Gorgolian revealed to Captain Sarpedon an ultimatum from the Inquisition. This proposition demanded the execution of the Space Marines involved in the Laconia incident in exchange for leniency. Gorgolian, steadfast in his belief that only a Soul Drinker could judge another Soul Drinker, had declined the offer. Consequently, he declared that Sarpedon must confront him in a ritual duel to the death, known as the Shield Rites, to adjudicate the righteousness of Sarpedon's actions on Laconia. At the climax of the duel, Sarpedon appeared to be influenced by an external force, spontaneously sprouting 8 arachnoid legs. This transformation granted him a significant advantage over Gorgolian, enabling him to dismember his former commander and claim the mantle of Chapter Master. Unbeknownst to Sarpedon at the time, this mutation was the result of the corrupting influence of the Chaos God Tzeentch, who aimed to make the Soul Drinkers another of his many pawns in the long war against the Imperium. Tzeentch, the Chaos God of change, sorcery, and fate, embodies the ever-shifting nature of the universe. Known as the Architect of Fate, he is the master of manipulation, deceit, and arcane power. Tzeentch thrives on the chaos and unpredictability of change, delighting in the intricate schemes and machinations that shape destinies. His followers, drawn to the promise of knowledge and power, often become entangled in his web of lies and transformations, serving his enigmatic purposes as pawns in the grand tapestry of his cosmic designs. Following a brief but bloody civil war with Soul Drinkers who opposed his mutation and those who believed in his purity, Sarpedon emerged as the new leader of the Soul Drinkers chapter. Despite their disavowal of the Imperium, which they deemed thoroughly corrupt, the Soul Drinkers maintained their unwavering loyalty to the Emperor of Mankind. Disillusioned with the Imperium and unknowingly manipulated by a Tzeentch demon prince posing as an aspect of the Emperor, Sarpedon decided to keep his chapter as renegades. He dismantled the Soul Drinkers' fleet and relocated the chapter to a space hulk, which they named the Brokenback. Soon after, the demon prince Abraxas cunningly misled the Soul Drinkers into attacking his rival, the Nurgle demon prince Vmeth. Vmeth, who had taken the form of a virus infecting several hundred people, was defeated by the Soul Drinkers. Following this victory, Abraxas revealed his true nature, presenting Sarpedon with the Soul Spear and proposing that the Soul Drinkers join him as his personal Chaos Space Marine retinue. Despite contemplating the offer, Sarpedon ultimately rejected it, leading an attack against Abraxas and his demons, and successfully vanquishing them. The Soul Drinkers' exposure to the raw power of chaos began to manifest further mutations among the chapter's Space Marines. Chapter Apothecary Palace successfully curbed the emergence of new mutations and arrested the progression of those already afflicted among the Astartes, thanks to crucial information retrieved from the planetoid Stratix Lumini. Stratix Lunini was the location of a renegade Adeptus Mechanicus genitor facility that produced a powerful mutant entity, called Tesseract. A genitor is a highly specialized member of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the technologically adept faction devoted to the worship of the Omnicia. Genitors are bioengineers and biologists who study and manipulate genetic material, often experimenting with and enhancing biological organisms, including humans. They are responsible for creating improved servitors, augmenting the capabilities of Skitarii soldiers, and conducting xenobiological research to understand and harness the genetics of alien species. Their work is crucial for the advancement of the Imperium's biological sciences and often involves morally ambiguous, or ethically questionable experiments in their relentless pursuit of knowledge and perfection. Tesseract resembled an emaciated humanoid, appearing almost lifeless with pallid skin stretched taut over a vestigial ribcage and a stringy abdomen. His limbs were disproportionately long, with too many fingers and toes and additional joints, yet he walked with unnerving confidence. His face was a knot of hanging skin, with faintly glowing triangular eyes. While a mutant Tetrarch was also a powerful psyker capable of piercing into the souls of his victims. As he controlled world after world, his mind expanded beyond the confines of his physical body, allowing him to generate toxins and diseases potent enough to harm even the Adeptus Astartes. Those who succumbed to his powers transformed into grotesque, malformed mutants, becoming devoted worshippers of the Tetrarch. Tetrarch harbored an intrinsic disdain for the mortal world, filled with an inherent hatred for life, a sentiment embedded in his very being, as his creation was never intended. To him, life equated to death, and death in turn signified power, the closest notion to something sacred in his perspective. From the moment of his inception, he viewed himself as a deity, endowed with godlike power and driven by a corresponding ambition. Chapter Master and Librarian Sarpedon resolved to venture to the facility on Stratix Lunini in a quest to halt the escalating mutations afflicting their ranks. It appeared that the Soul Drinkers had been to Stratix Lunini on an earlier mission and had prior knowledge of the renegade Genitor facility. They had believed that they had destroyed all of the abdominal creations within the facility, including Tetrarch, though the mutant abomination survived and created the evil empire mentioned previously. A Space Marine Librarian is a powerful psyker and warrior mystic, serving as both a battlefield leader and a repository of esoteric knowledge within a Space Marine chapter. Librarians harness the raw energies of the warp to unleash devastating psychic powers, such as mind control, telekinesis, and destructive energy blasts, while also wielding traditional weapons. They are responsible for communing with the Emperor, interpreting omens, and safeguarding the chapter from the corrupting influence of chaos. Their role is a critical fusion of psychic might, martial prowess, and spiritual guidance. This endeavor brought them into direct conflict not only with the Tetrarch but also with an Inquisition task force, led by Inquisitor Thaddeus. You see, the Inquisition was in constant pursuit of the Soul Drinkers, with a large number of Imperial assets dedicated to their arrest and execution. In the ensuing battle, the Soul Drinkers seemingly worked together with the Inquisition to battle the greater threat. Inquisitor Thaddeus obliterated the Tetrarch's physical form, while Sarpedon vanquished the mutant's mind, seemingly neutralizing the threat it posed. This would be one of the initial moments that members of the Imperium would begin to question the motives of the Soul Drinkers, and if they were indeed heretical. This achievement, however, came at a significant cost. The Soul Drinkers were compelled to leave behind Sergeant Telos and his cadre of assault marines during their escape. In their desperation for survival, Telos and his squad ultimately embraced the service of chaos completely. Telos was an assault marine sergeant who led a valiant assault squad on Starfort Laconia. It's here that Telos sustained severe injuries when both of his hands were violently torn off at the wrists by an Adeptus Mechanicus Electro Priest. His life was saved by the Soul Drinkers' apothecary Pallas, who dragged him to safety. While recuperating aboard the Soul Drinkers' starship Gundog, Telos was discovered inserting metal shafts into his severed wrists and randomly destroying servitors in the ship's librarium. This behavior marked the collapse of his sanity as a space marine and the onset of pronounced mutations, as he succumbed to the chaos corruption of the blood god Khorne. Khorne, the blood god, is one of the four major chaos gods, embodying violence, war, and bloodshed. He thrives on the carnage of battle and the spilling of blood, demanding constant slaughter and rejecting all forms of magic and subtlety. Khorne's followers, known as the Khornate, are brutal warriors who revel in combat, seeking to please their god through relentless killing. His domain in the warp is a hellish realm of constant warfare, and his creed is simple: blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. Khorne represents the raw, unbridled fury of war and the endless thirst for blood. Telos exhibited the most overt chaotic mutations in the chapter, surpassed only by those of Chapter Master Sarpedon. Driven by an insatiable desire to fight regardless of the odds, he had chain blades grafted to his arms, which his accelerated healing mutation kept securely in place, allowing him to regenerate almost any damage instantaneously. His second mutation was a grotesquely enhanced muscular system and semi-translucent skin. During the quest to find a cure for the rampant chaos-induced mutations plaguing the Soul Drinkers, Telos frequently defied Sarpedon's orders. When the cure was finally discovered, the Soul Drinkers were compelled to abandon Telos and 40 assault marines on Stratix Lumini. They were last seen engaging tens of thousands of mutants and undead creatures from the Chaos Lord Tetrarch's heretical army. Several standard years later, Sarpedon received news that Telos and his assault marines had annihilated all life on Stratix Lumini, and had openly sworn fealty to Khorne, the chaos god of blood and war. Telos was eventually tracked to Endymion for Endymion IV was an imperial agri-world that had fallen under the control of a mysterious alliance between the Dark Eldar and Slaaneshi cultists. At this time, the Imperial Guard, with the support of the Crimson Fists, were engaged in an effort to liberate the planet. Initially, the Crimson Fist's presence was modest, acting as a spearhead for the various Imperial Guard regiments striving to reclaim the capital city of Gravenhold. However, their advance was soon met with resistance from Telos Khorne-possessed soul drinkers, resulting in an indecisive skirmish as the Fists established overwatch positions within a cathedral. Upon reaching Endymion IV, Sarpedon's soul drinkers swiftly initiated their reconnaissance of the area. Their covert entry, which involved commandeering 2 landers from the Imperial Navy, soon revealed their position to the Crimson Fists. The soul drinkers were attempting to do everything within their power to not raise the alert of the loyalist Crimson Fists, though. To no avail, loyalist Space Marines such as the Crimson Fist harbor an intense hatred for Chaos Space Marines because they view them as the ultimate betrayal of everything they stand for. Chaos Space Marines are former brothers who turned against the Emperor and the Imperium, succumbing to the corrupting influence of the Chaos Gods. This betrayal during the Horus Heresy, when many Space Marines turned traitor, led to the near collapse of the Imperium. Loyalists see Chaos Space Marines as irredeemable heretics who have defiled their oaths, sullied the honor of the Adeptus Astartes, and become monstrous embodiments of corruption. As a result, they seek to destroy them on sight to avenge their fallen brothers and protect humanity from the malevolent forces of chaos. The Crimson Fists would be even more keen to destroy the Soul Drinkers as they were viewed as a corrupted Space Marine chapter. From their own lineage of Rogal Dorn, with the backing of the armored fist units from the Fornix Lix Fire Drake's regiment, the Crimson Fists penetrated deep into the urban landscape, culminating in a violent clash within the mercantile chamber. In the ensuing melee, the Soul Drinkers succeeded in capturing the Crimson Fists company standard and slaying the company librarian, before retreating from the battlefield. Losing a battle standard to the enemy is a grave and catastrophic event for a Space Marine chapter, because the standard symbolizes the chapter's honor, legacy, and the collective spirit of its warriors. The standard is often a relic of great historical significance, carried into battle as a beacon of inspiration and a reminder of the chapter's storied past. To lose it not only represents a severe blow to morale but also signifies a profound failure in the eyes of the chapter and the Imperium. Such a loss is seen as a stain on the chapter's honor, and recovering or avenging the loss becomes a matter of utmost importance, as it threatens the very identity and reputation of the chapter within the Imperium. Losing a librarian is extremely detrimental for a Space Marine chapter because librarians serve as the chapter's psychic warriors, spiritual guides and keepers of ancient knowledge. The death of a librarian not only diminishes the chapter's psychic capabilities but also risks the loss of irreplaceable lore and spiritual leadership, leaving the chapter more vulnerable to both physical and spiritual dangers. During the conflict, the Dark Eldar on the planet watched the Soul Drinkers battling the Loyalist forces. When the Dark Eldar's brainwashed slave army intervened, it hindered the Crimson Fist's pursuit as the Soul Drinkers retreated underground. The Dark Eldar soon approached Sarpedon, proposing an alliance with clear intentions of betrayal. Sarpedon, harboring his own plans of treachery, accepted their offer. You see, the Dark Eldar Cabal, the Burning Scale, was led by a possessed pirate prince named Karhedros, who was also the Archon of the Cabal. At an unspecified time, he took up residence in the Dark Eldar capital city of Komarak, hidden within the Webway. It was there that the Chaos God Slaanesh began influencing his thoughts, inspiring him with the vision of creating the true home for the Eldar race. Driven by this dark revelation, he departed from Komarak with a loyal following, including his lieutenant Akrelthas, a group of witches, and a retinue of incubi bodyguards. As outcasts and renegades, they turned to piracy to escape the harsh persecution of Komaraka's rulers. Shifting his focus to the Imperium of Man, he sought to uncover what held true value to humanity. Dismissing the importance of personnel or equipment, he concluded that entire worlds were the key. With this realization, he covertly established a base on the planet Endymion IV, where he hatched a sinister plan to use conflict to open a portal into the warp, allowing Slaanesh to transform the planet into a demon world. His goal was to create a new Komarak, a beacon for the Eldar race. During this secretive campaign, he became aware of the renegade Soul Drinkers chapter and forged an apparent alliance with Chapter Master Sarpedon, intending to manipulate him to achieve his own ends. Focused solely on locating Telos, the Soul Drinkers did not know the extent of the Dark Eldar's plans, but suspected nefarious purposes nonetheless. Sarpedon divided the Soul Drinkers into two groups to hinder the Imperial Guard for the Dark Eldar, while the Soul Drinkers' scouts searched for Telos within the city. The scouts soon found Telos and his followers as they slaughtered their way through a guard regiment. Chaplain Ictinos and his contingent managed to hold them at bay until Sarpedon could arrive. Sarpedon found Telos on the top of a ruined bridge. The two titans locked in a climactic and fateful duel atop of the precarious bridge. The confrontation was fierce and evenly matched, pushing both combatants to the brink of their limits. Despite the ferocity of his opponent, Sarpedon managed to eke out a narrow victory, though the struggle left him nearly spent. However, the intensity of the battle proved too much for the already unstable structure, causing the bridge to give way beneath them. As the ancient stonework crumbled, Sarpedon could only watch as Telos was swallowed by the ensuing collapse, entombed beneath a cascade of rubble and debris. The Dark Eldar still gained an advantage, buying enough time for their hidden army of mutated human monstrosities to fully awaken beneath the city and initiate a massacre, so severe that it would elevate Intimian IV to the status of a demon world. Envisioned as a second Comarak under Dark Eldar rule, Karhedros, through the arcane and forbidden use of sorcery, achieved his dark ambition by tearing open the fabric of reality itself. This rift in the warp, a conduit to the Imperium, steadily widened as he believed his continued existence was a sign of Slaanesh's favor, thus proclaiming himself the Pirate King. As the rift grew, demons began to pour into the material realm, manifesting the chaos he had sown. With his plans nearing fruition, Karhedros became convinced of his apotheosis, seeing himself as a god reborn, destined to unite the Eldar race under the banner of Slaanesh. Ultimately, the Soul Drinkers outmaneuvered the vile Xenos by using their scouts to deceive the Crimson Fists into assaulting the Dark Eldar stronghold. In his hubris, Karhedros launched an assault on Commander Rhaenez of the Crimson Fists. However, the confrontation did not unfold as he envisioned. During the fierce struggle, the Space Marine commander, with a final act of defiance, hurled the Dark Eldar Pirate King into the very warp portal he had created. On the other side, the entities that dwelled within the Imperium claimed his life, extinguishing his grand delusions of godhood and leaving his ambitions to die with him. Nevertheless, the irreversible damage had been inflicted. The rift in reality, opening a direct conduit to the warp, had irreparably corrupted the world, sealing its fate. The only recourse was total annihilation through exterminatus. All remaining Imperial forces were promptly evacuated as Inquisitor Ahenobarbus of the Ordo Hereticus declared the planet an extremis diabolus, marking it for destruction. The Soul Drinkers found themselves on the brink of internal conflict between Chapter Master Sarpedon and the newly appointed Sergeant Eumenes, who had been recruited from a planet with deep-seated animosity towards the Imperium. Eumenes believed that they should directly confront the Emperor by destroying the Astronomicon, thereby extinguishing the guiding light for the Emperor's ships and triggering a complete overhaul of the Imperium. Sarpedon, however, decided to chart a different course for the chapter, influenced by Chaplain Ictinos' counsel. He learned that the planet Vanqualis was under siege by an orc horde and required their defense. Viewing this as an opportunity to both aid the planet and replenish their supplies for their new base, the Brokenback, Sarpedon led the Soul Drinkers through Vanqualis' jungles to combat the orcs. During Sarpedon's absence, Eumenes seized control of the Brokenback and initiated a coup, garnering significant support from forces stationed on the planet. After regaining cohesion, Sarpedon's loyalists set out to reclaim an old fortress from the rebels. Upon arrival, Librarian Gresk warned Sarpedon to withdraw, prompting him to retreat just before Eumenes launched a bombardment from the Brokenback on the area surrounding the fortress. Unbeknownst to the Soul Drinkers, but the Howling Griffin Space Marine chapter were also deployed with 3 companies, led by Lord Librarian Mersino, to Vanqualis in order to honor an ancient debt owed to the planet. Alongside them was Inquisitor Thaddeus, who had fallen out of favor with the Inquisition and joined the mission due to his suspicions regarding the Soul Drinkers' activities. Thaddeus was the very same Inquisitor that had assisted the Soul Drinkers and specifically Sarpedon, with the vanquishing of the mutant Psyker Tesseract. Because he did not capture the Soul Drinkers on Stratix Lunini, Thaddeus was relegated to a lesser role within the Inquisition as he continued to investigate the Soul Drinkers. Although Thaddeus understood the true nature of the Soul Drinkers, he struggled to convey this to Mersino. The Howling Griffins had mistaken the Soul Drinkers for a different Chaos Space Marine contingent as they were on the trail for the Knights of the Black Chalice. Determined to alert Sarpedon about the Griffins' presence, Thaddeus attempted to leave the strike cruiser. However, he was forced into a deadly confrontation with a Griffin, whom he killed in close-quarters combat to secure his escape. Mersino and his forces landed soon after, engaging in battle with Sarpedon's group while Eumeni's soul drinker traders observed with amusement from the brokeback. In the midst of the conflict, Mersino, seeking retribution for his fallen comrade, killed Thaddeus. Sarpedon found himself unable to leave Vanqualis and was ultimately forced to acquiesce to Eumeni's demands, resulting in Eumenes assuming the role of chapter master. Sarpedon then rallied his loyal soul drinkers and sought out Techmarine Ligris, who remained faithful to him but was confined to the Brokenback. Eumenes eventually permitted Ligris to shuttle Sarpedon and his forces back to their ship just in time to fend off a boarding assault from the Howling Griffins. A titanic psychic duel ensued between Sarpedon and Mersino, leaving both combatants exhausted. Seizing the opportunity, Eumenes struck down Mersino from behind and imprisoned Sarpedon in the brig. While confined, Sarpedon incapacitated Scout Scamander, who exhibited latent psychic abilities, and then made his way to the bridge to confront Eumenes. In front of all of the soul drinkers, Sarpedon met with Eumenes on the bridge of the Space Hulk, conceding mastery of the chapter. Despite Eumenes wielding both the Soul Spear and Mersino's Force Axe, Sarpedon utilized his mutated legs to impale Eumenes. As he died, Sarpedon stated that Eumenes was unworthy to be the chapter master and that anyone else present could challenge him to become the chapter master. No one challenged Sarpedon, though at least one squad of soul drinkers did leave the chapter. Sarpedon would remain the chapter master of this radical Space Marine chapter. While evading an Adeptus Mechanicus task force, the Soul Drinker's Space Hulk suffers extensive damage and faces a critical fuel shortage. In their desperate search for resources, they venture deep into the Veiled Regions, encountering numerous worlds overrun by Necrons, all bearing remnants of prior human habitation now overwhelmed by the undying Xenos. The Veiled Region, an expansive and largely uncharted area in the Segmentum Tempestus of the galactic south, is characterized by dense nebulae, newborn stars, and high levels of ionizing radiation. This, along with various spacetime anomalies and thick stellar dust, renders it challenging for Imperial sensors to penetrate. Giving the region its name, the Veiled Region is a haven for Orc freebooters, Xenos mercenaries, and Imperial traders in search of profitable routes in undiscovered worlds. Unknown to much of the Imperium, it also harbors numerous Necron dynasties. Additionally, the inhabited worlds within this region have endured significant devastation from the Khornate Berserkers. One of the paramount challenges encountered in the exploration of the Veiled Region was the severely restricted nature of astropathic communication with Imperial vessels that dared to venture into this obscure expanse. Astrotelepathic signals dispatched from beyond the borders of the Veiled Region frequently suffered from anomalous reflection, rendering any attempts at maintaining contact with exploratory fleets futile and ensuring that those who entered were effectively cut off from Imperial oversight. Owing to the profound lack of reliable intelligence regarding the mysteries concealed within the Veiled Region, the Imperium, in its wisdom, decreed long ago that no human colonies were to be established within its perilous confines, thereby preserving the area's enigma and insulating the broader galaxy from potential unknown threats. Eventually, the Soul Drinkers stumbled upon the last remaining human-inhabited world still under assault by the Necrons. Striking a deal with the beleaguered survivors, the Soul Drinkers agreed to hold off the Necron forces, allowing the humans time to evacuate to their spacecraft. In return, the Soul Drinkers are provided with the much-needed fuel to continue their journey. The Soul Drinkers managed to withstand the Necron onslaught long enough for the human population to reach their spaceport. However, their escape is thwarted when a Necron fleet arrives in the system, blocking any chance of departure. Shortly thereafter, the Adeptus Mechanicus fleet enters the fray, engaging in combat with the Necrons. Realizing that the Imperial forces are outmatched and facing certain destruction, they initiate a series of intricate maneuvers in a desperate attempt to delay their inevitable defeat. Recognizing their inability to defeat the advancing Necron forces on the ground, and foreseeing the Mechanicus' impending defeat in space, Sarpedon proposed an alliance with the Mechanicus. The current Soul Drinker's chaplain Ictinos and his followers stayed behind to defend the spaceport and protect the remaining humans. Unbeknownst to Sarpedon and the rest of the Soul Drinkers, but Ictinos and his small group were now loyal to a hidden master, no longer identified themselves as Soul Drinkers. Having forged an alliance, the Mechanicus and Soul Drinkers embarked on a mission to the primary Necron hub with the intent of annihilating the Necron Lord, and thereby rendering the remaining enemy forces leaderless. Upon reaching the Tomb World, the Mechanicus executed a daring maneuver by crashing their ship into the planet and deploying their troops alongside the Soul Drinkers. A protracted and brutal battle ensued as both forces raced against time to eliminate the Necron Lord. before the overwhelming numbers of Necron warriors could turn the tide. Eventually, they confronted the Necron Lord, leading to a fierce duel between Sarpedon and the formidable adversary. Sarpedon emerged victorious, only for the Necron Lord to reanimate, as is typical of their kind, and begin to crush him. The situation appeared dire until a tech marine by the name of Lygus made a self-sacrificial move, ultimately ensuring the permanent defeat of the Necron Lord. Lygus, equipped with deep knowledge of both Imperial technology and Xenos mechanisms, possibly utilized scrap code to ultimately defeat the Necron Lord, but at the cost of his own life. Scrap code is a malicious code designed to corrupt and destabilize machine systems. Necron technology, while immensely advanced, relies on intricate and precise digital networks to maintain its function and control its formidable construct, including the Necron Lords themselves. By infiltrating this network with scrap code, the Tech Marine could introduce catastrophic errors into the Necron Lord's systems, disrupting the complex algorithms that govern its resurrection protocols and command structures. This could lead to a failure in the Necron Lord's ability to phase out and self-repair, essentially trapping its consciousness within a corrupted, non-functional body, thereby ensuring it cannot rise again. The scrap code, acting as a relentless digital virus, would continue to erode the Necron systems, rendering it permanently inoperative and neutralizing the threat it poses. Assembling his forces, Sarpedon led his remaining troops toward the wreckage of the Adeptus Mechanicus ship, where their promised transports were supposed to be waiting. Instead, 3 Imperial Fists Thunderhawk gunships descended upon the surface, while 20 elite Terminator armored warriors, led by First Captain Darneth Lysander, teleported onto the planet. Lysander demanded that the Soul Drinkers surrender or face annihilation. Sarpedon responded with a challenge to a personal duel. Despite his warp-enhanced strength, Sarpedon, exhausted from the earlier battles with the Necron forces, was quickly defeated. In his final moments of consciousness, Sarpedon hoped that Chapter would honor his last command to surrender if he were to fall. Following their capture, the surviving Soul Drinkers were brought to trial aboard the Phalanx. The Phalanx is a massive starship and mobile fortress monastery of the Imperial 5th Space Marine Chapter. It is one of the largest and most powerful spacecraft in the Imperium of Man, renowned for its immense size and formidable defensive capabilities. A conclave of Imperial 5th successor chapters and other relevant parties convened to deliberate their fate. During the proceedings, Commander Gethsemer of the Angels Sanguine revealed that the sanguinary priests of his chapter had conducted an examination of the Soul Drinkers' gene seed. This analysis, part of their broader research into the correlation between gene seed and Primarch lineage, as well as to investigate whether the chapter's downfall was due to gene seed corruption, uncovered that Rogal Dorn is not the chapter's Primarch. A distinguished council of Space Marines was convened to evaluate the evidence and render a verdict on the renegade chapter. This esteemed assembly included delegates from various Imperial Fist successor chapters, notably the Crimson Fist, Howling Griffins, and Iron Knights. Additionally, the conclave was augmented by representatives from chapters unaffiliated with the Imperial Fist's lineage, such as the Doom Eagles, Silver Skulls, and Angels Sanguine, ensuring a diverse and impartial judgment. Additionally, there was a representative from the Inquisition present, accompanied by a small contingent of battle sisters from the Adeptus Sororitas and tech priests from the Adeptus Mechanicus. Upon hearing news of the Soul Drinkers' capture and subsequent trial, Brother Reynez petitioned the conclave of Space Marines to be the prosecutor. Brother Reynez, having relinquished his rank, sought the approval of his chapter master to embark upon the arduous path of the warrior's pilgrimage, a solitary journey across the galaxy wherein a Space Marine, burdened by the weight of his transgressions, seeks to atone for his perceived failures. This pilgrimage involves the warrior wandering the vast expanse of the galaxy, driven by the desire to encounter a foe formidable enough to bring about his death, thereby allowing him to achieve redemption through a final, honorable sacrifice. Brother Reynez, once the esteemed captain of the Crimson Fist Second Company, found himself disgraced following his defeat by the Soul Drinkers on Intimian 5, where he lost his company standard in combat. He also took the deaths of many of his fellow Space Marines and the destruction of Intimian 5 as a personal insult to his honor. Upon their initial boarding of the Soul Drinkers, the Imperial Fists uncovered a copy of the Soul Drinkers' so-called Catechism Martial, a tome of considerable significance. This artifact was obtained during the confiscation of a member of Chaplain Ictino's flock, compelling him to surrender both the book and the hidden knowledge within its pages. The Catechisms Martial is a revered tome authored by Dionythos, a renowned philosopher marine of the Soul Drinkers chapter, approximately 8,000 years ago. Every Space Marine within the Soul Drinkers chapter bears a personal copy of this sacred text, which is meticulously retrieved from their remains after death. The teachings of Dionysos hold such significance that the Soul Drinkers are deeply committed to adhering to his philosophical guidance throughout their lives. Dionysos had previously disappeared mysteriously, but was revered by every Soul Drinker. The individuals in Ictino's flock were the remnants of the Soul Drinkers, whose leadership had been decimated over time as the chapter's strength waned, leading them to seek guidance under Chaplain Ictinos. The heresies and unsettling truths chronicled in the Catechism Martial piqued the Imperial Fist's curiosity, prompting them to initiate a thorough interrogation of Ictinos Astartes. During the probing by Lord Castellan Lucrantas of the Imperial Fist, Brother Kayan of the Soul Drinkers divulged the chapter's most guarded secrets, exposing them to their captors. During this trial and investigation, it was astonishingly unveiled that Dionysos, the legendary and long-presumed lost chaplain of the Soul Drinkers, had been discovered to be alive. This venerable figure was found to persist within the sarcophagus of a dreadnought, which had been concealed for untold ages within a crypt on the surface of Salaka. Unbeknownst to Sarpedon, the existence of this tomb, and indeed, the survival of any dreadnoughts from his chapter, was a fact obscured by the passage of millennia, as it was believed that the last of their revered dreadnoughts had perished over 6,000 years prior. Dionysos, with unparalleled cunning, had surreptitiously orchestrated events to ensure that the Soul Drinkers would cross paths with the Necrons, thereby leading them inexorably to the discovery of his concealed resting place. Through an intricate web of carefully laid clues and manipulations that spanned millennia, Dionysos engineered the culmination of his plan, whereby the rediscovery of Salaka would ultimately result in his resurrection and conveyance to the Phalanx. A dreadnought is a powerful, heavily armored war machine typically housing a mortally wounded Space Marine. Encased in this formidable exoskeleton, the Marine can continue to fight, wielding devastating weaponry and immense strength. Dreadnoughts serve as both mobile artillery and frontline combat units, embodying a fusion of ancient technology and the indomitable spirit of the Space Marines. During the trial, Reynes denounced the Soul Drinkers, insinuating that their corruption spanned millennia under Dionysos' influence. He accused them of long-standing allegiance to the ruinous powers, asserting that they had conspired to execute a sinister plan for the Dark Gods, aimed at undermining the Imperium. As Reynes presented his damning evidence against the chapter, a stark revelation struck Sarpedon. Chaplain Ictinos had been orchestrating the Soul Drinkers' descent into damnation, all to fulfill an obscure destiny prophesied long ago by Dionysos. The full extent of this insidious manipulation now lay bare, exposing the treachery that had steered them towards ruin. Commander Gethsemer of the Angels Sanguine chapter cast significant doubt upon the legitimacy of the Soul Drinkers' assertions, that they were direct genetic descendants of the Primarch Rogal Dorn. In pursuit of the truth, the Angels Sanguine captured a member of the Soul Drinkers and harvested his gene seed for a thorough medical analysis, aiming to determine whether the chapter's heretical tendencies stemmed from a corruption within their genetic code. As the investigation progressed, the Angels Sanguine were shocked to discover that the genetic makeup of the Soul Drinkers bore no discernible connection to the Imperial Fists or Rogal Dorn. This revelation threw the Soul Drinkers' claimed lineage into serious question. Without further and more exhaustive research, the origins of the Soul Drinkers' genetic legacy remained shrouded in uncertainty, leaving their true chapter lineage an unresolved enigma. Throughout the trial, the pilgrims of the Order of the Blinded Eye, unknowingly ensnared by the intricate schemes of Dionysos, plotted and liberated the Soul Drinkers who were imprisoned from their captivity. The Order was a religious group that believed that they were destined to save humanity through service to the Soul Drinkers and the broader galaxy, doing whatever was necessary to save humanity. Manipulated by Dionysos' cunning, the members of the Order of the Blinded Eye became unwitting pawns in his grand design, aiding him in the pursuit of his enigmatic goals. The surviving Soul Drinkers, seizing this unexpected opportunity, made their final stand within the hallowed confines of the Phalanx's librarium. As they dug in, the forces of the Imperial Fists, alongside their successor chapter allies, converged upon their position, igniting a fierce and brutal firefight. Nobody knew that this was a terrible error as Battle Brother slaughtered Battle Brother in a horrid conflict of confusion and sorrow. However, the escape of the Soul Drinkers from their cells was merely a calculated distraction, orchestrated by Dionysos to facilitate the culmination of his meticulously crafted plan. His most devoted disciple, Chaplain Ictinos, executed the critical task of abducting Captain Kahlo of the Iron Knights. Delivering him to his master's clutches, Captain Kahlo was critically wounded, causing his lifeblood to hemorrhage out. being made into an unwilling sacrifice for the dark gods. With the blood of the grievously wounded Astartes, Dionythos accessed the genetic code of Rogal Dorn, utilizing it as the key to unlock a notorious warp gate known as the Predator's Eye, which had been concealed within the very heart of the Imperial Fist's fortress monastery. The Predator's Eye, a concealed warp gate, lay hidden within the fortress monastery of the Imperial Fists. Primarch Rogal Dorn, unable to eradicate it completely, had sealed the gate nearly 10 millennia ago, vowing that one day, when other countless threats had been quelled, he and his chapter's librarians and champions would finally obliterate the Predator's Eye. Originally situated in the Kravamesh system within the Veiled region, the warp gate had been surreptitiously relocated to the heart of the Phalanx by Dionythos millennia prior. This covert act occurred during the tumultuous assault on Terra aimed at overthrowing the renegade High Lord of Terra, Goj Vandire, at the conclusion of the Age of Apostasy in the early 36th millennium. Dionythos' sinister objective was to plunge the Imperium into a new dark age, under the belief that from its ruin, a stronger Imperium would arise, one that he intended to rule. Dionythos held the conviction that the Imperium was irremediably corrupt and its populace irrevocably doomed. 6 millennia prior, he had discerned that the Imperium was a grim and barbaric realm, a crucible of despair that offered the forces of chaos ample opportunity to perpetrate their malevolence within the material universe. He envisaged that the Imperium's renewal would be forged through profound suffering on a scale that eluded the comprehension of lesser intellect. Through a meticulously devised scheme, which he orchestrated across the vast expanse of space and time, Dionythos manipulated numerous individuals, including the Soul Drinkers Sarpedon and the Demon Prince Abrexes. The Phalanx would trail an epoch of unprecedented suffering, thereby reshaping the Imperium into a more robust and equitable entity, with Dionythos envisioning himself as the sovereign ruler of the galaxy. It now came to light that the Soul Dringer's chaplain Ictinos and his followers had been secretly working with Dionythos to create this sinister plot that would damn the Imperium if it came to fruition. From the newly opened warp gate, the vile denizens of the Immaterium poured forth, led by Abrexes, a demon prince of Zeech and the orchestrator of the Soul Drinker's fate. Dionythos aimed to exploit Abrexes' immense power to traverse the galaxy, using the Phalanx as his personal vessel to disseminate chaos throughout the Emperor's domain. Sarpedon, having eluded his captors, successfully rejoined the remnants of his remaining Soul Drinkers. With resolve hardened by circumstance, he left them to embrace what he deemed a glorious end within the hallowed confines of the Imperial Fist's Librarium, while he embarked on a perilous quest to uncover the whereabouts of Dionythos. However, his pursuit was abruptly interrupted by the machinations of Ictinos and his devoted acolytes. The small contingent of Soul Drinkers that accompanied Sarpedon was ruthlessly cut down in a meticulously orchestrated ambush, their lives snuffed out by the precise and calculated assault. Overcome with fury, Sarpedon unleashed his wrath upon the assailants, slaughtering Ictinos' followers in a display of relentless vengeance. With blood still fresh upon his hands, Sarpedon turned his ire toward the renegade chaplain, determined to confront him directly. As the beleaguered remnants of the Soul Drinkers mounted a valiant defense within the shattered remains of the Phalanx's Librarium, they were acutely aware that their defiance was merely delaying the inevitable, for they faced the inexorable tide of attrition at the hands of the loyalist Space Marines. In the midst of the ferocious and unrelenting conflict, when the intensity of battle had reached its zenith, the encroaching forces of the Imperial Fists and their allied chapters suddenly and inexplicably disengaged from the fray, withdrawing their warriors with a swiftness that defied the unfolding chaos. The once tumultuous Librarium, which had echoed with the sounds of war, was abruptly enveloped in an eerie and unsettling silence, as the loyalist Space Marines redirected their focus and marshaled their strength elsewhere, leaving the battered defenders momentarily untouched in the quiet aftermath. Perceiving that an insidious disturbance was unfolding, Captain Luco of the Soul Drinkers, with a growing sense of unease, marshaled the remaining battle brothers under his command and led them away from the beleaguered Librarium. Captain Luco, a steadfast figure among the original Soul Drinkers who had resolutely remained at Sarpedon's side, not only exhibited unyielding loyalty but had also provided unwavering support throughout the entirety of their tumultuous journey, as a renegade chapter. As they cautiously retreated, their attention turned to the intercepted Vox traffic of the Imperial Fists, through which they discerned a grave revelation. The vile Abrexes, a harbinger of chaos, was spearheading a vast demonic host that had infiltrated and was now savagely assailing the Imperial Fists, from within the very heart of their own fortress monastery. With unwavering resolve, they stood before Chapter Master Vladimir Pugh of the Imperial Fists, humbly yet boldly beseeching him for the honor to join his warriors in the coming battle, a battle in which they were prepared to lay down their lives in the face of a shared, existential threat. Despite the Imperial Fist's reservations, aware of the grim fate that awaited their petitioners, they reluctantly acquiesced to the Soul Drinker's desperate plea, recognizing that allowing them to stand against the demonic foe was tantamount to signing their death warrant. Sarpedon, having tracked down the elusive Ictinos, engaged him in a brutal and unrelenting struggle, their ferocious hand-to-hand combat culminating in a moment of profound violence. Though grievously wounded, Sarpedon succeeded in overpowering the renegade chaplain. Drawing upon his formidable psychic prowess, specifically the dread ability known as the Hell, Sarpedon mercilessly tore the truth from Ictino's fractured mind. In doing so, he uncovered the full scope of Dianyatho's insidious machinations, a revelation that laid bare the grim reality of his manipulation over countless millennia. To his horror, Sarpedon realized he had been but a mere instrument, a pawn entangled in Dianyatho's ancient and labyrinthine schemes. Having wrested the knowledge he sought, Sarpedon, with cold efficiency, disposed of the shattered chaplain, whose mind had been obliterated by the psychic onslaught. Without hesitation, he ejected Ictino's dying form into the cold, unforgiving void of space. His immediate goal accomplished, Sarpedon advanced inexorably toward the heart of the Phalanx, where he confronted the enigmatic Dianyathos. In a chilling exchange, Dianyathos confirmed Sarpedon's worst suspicions, laying bare the apocalyptic vision of his grand design for the galaxy, a vision that had manipulated events across the eons with devastating precision. With unwavering courage, Sarpedon engaged the corrupted dreadnought in a desperate and ferocious confrontation, determined to thwart the realization of Dianyathos' twisted and grandiose designs. In the chaos of their violent exchange, Sarpedon was subjected to a relentless barrage of destructive force, suffering grievous and near-fatal injuries as the dreadnought unleashed its devastating arsenal, its missiles striking with unerring precision, and the storm bolter raking him with brutal, unyielding firepower. Despite his valiant efforts, the weight of these mortal wounds threatened to overwhelm him as the battle raged on. The towering dreadnought, exuding an air of smug superiority, seized the mortally wounded chapter master Sarpedon in the crushing grip of its power fist. Its intent was clear, to savor the moment of Sarpedon's demise by pulling him closer, relishing the spectacle of extinguishing the life of its prey. In a moment of calculated desperation, Sarpedon enacted his final gambit. With deliberate precision, he reached into the ammunition pouch hanging from his belt and withdrew the Soul Spear, an ancient archaeotech weapon of unparalleled lethality, an artifact reclaimed from Ictinos during their fateful encounter aboard the Phalanx. Its twin blades, encased in a deadly vortex field, shimmered ominously as Sarpedon summoned the strength to wield it. With a swift and decisive motion, he slashed the Soul Spear upward, slicing cleanly through the dreadnought's heart, its cybernetic sarcophagus, severing it from the mechanical Titan's armored chassis. The crushing force of the power fist instantly ceased, its death grip loosening as the mighty machine fell silent. Freed from the paralyzing grasp, Sarpedon rose to his feet, now standing before the sundered remains of the dreadnought. The once impenetrable front of the war machine had been violently cleaved open, exposing the ancient and decrepit life support cradle where Dianyathos had lingered for over 6 millennia. The tangled mass of cables and machinery were all that remained between Sarpedon and his quarry. With grim determination, Sarpedon reached into the exposed cradle, tearing away the intricate web of wires and tubes that sustained Dianyathos' fragile existence. His hand closed around the withered neck of the once great warrior, now reduced to a shadow of his former self. In one final act of retribution, Sarpedon dragged the feeble traitor from the ruins of the sarcophagus, his mind already set on a fate deserving of Dianyathos' treachery. Captain Luco and Sergeant Grievous of the Soul Drinkers, accompanied by a select detachment of Imperial Fists, Librarian Varnica of the Silver Skulls, and a resolute battle sister of the Adepta Sororitas, advanced with grim determination toward the Predator's eye. Their mission, to seal the warp gate and confront the malevolent Abrixes directly. Each step brought them closer to the looming confrontation, where the forces of chaos threatened to tear reality asunder, and they steeled themselves for the perilous task of standing against the darkness. Why the ferocious conflict claimed the lives of many Space Marines, including several brave soul drinkers who laid down their lives to safeguard humanity. Among them was Terendian, a powerful librarian of the chapter, renowned for his ability to channel devastating lightning attacks. His fate was sealed in a climactic encounter with a towering Great Unclean One. In his final act of sacrifice, Terendian unleashed the full magnitude of his psychic power in a catastrophic explosion, obliterating the greater demon of Nurgle but perishing in the process. Throughout their arduous journey, the strike force was relentlessly assaulted by the nightmarish denizens of the warp, suffering heavy losses at the hands of these infernal adversaries. In the culminating battle, the surviving Astartes and the indomitable sister Iscarion faced the demon prince in a desperate struggle. Against all odds, they prevailed, forcing the savage creature back through the warp gate, which then began to seal itself, halting the demon's advance. As the pitched battle between the beleaguered Imperial defenders and the overwhelming demonic horde reached its zenith, the sudden closure of the warp gate shattered the demon's connection to Abrex's and the Imperium. The once unstoppable demons fell to their knees, writhing in agony as their bond with the warp was severed. Seizing the opportunity, the Imperial forces surged forward, cutting through the disoriented demons with relentless fury. The defenders drove their foes back through the Phalanx's labyrinthine forges, pushing the remnants of the demonic infestation toward the cargo bays, where the heart of the corruption had first taken root. Librarian Varnica, Sister Iscarion, and the two soul drinkers, Luco and Grievous, emerged as the sole survivors of the cataclysmic battle to seal the warp gate. When first Captain Lysander arrived to apprehend the soul drinkers, Luco, despite his own exhaustion, dragged the grievously wounded Grievous toward the rapidly closing portal. Both warriors, scarred by their long and bitter struggle, understood with grim clarity that they no longer had a place in the galaxy. They had become outcast, whether in the dungeons of the Phalanx or subject to whatever harsh judgment awaited them. Freedom itself held no allure for them anymore, as the weight of the galaxy's relentless hostility had long crushed any hope of refuge or redemption. Their path had reached a dead end, and they would not allow themselves to be taken by the Imperial fists. With resolute finality, Luco and Grievous made their fateful decision. They stepped into the portal, vanishing into the heart of the warp, embracing the unknown and whatever cruel destiny lay beyond the Immaterium's veil. As the portal sealed behind them, the chaotic madness of the warp was forever severed from real space, bringing the final chapter of their tragic saga to a close. As the last remnants of the demonic horde were being systematically exterminated by the combined forces of the Imperial fists, and howling griffins aboard the vessel, Sarpedon emerged from the shadows, his presence undeniable. Though gravely wounded, the chapter master remained unbroken, defiant in the face of death. With a grim and deliberate gesture, Sarpedon presented the desiccated remains of Dionysos to chapter master Vladimir Pugh and the assembled Imperial fists. Revealing the twisted truth, it was Dionysos who had orchestrated the summoning of Abrexes from the depths of the warp. Sarpedon laid bare the full extent of Dionysos' treachery, exposing him as the master architect behind the soul drinkers' fall from grace. Through cunning manipulation and ancient foresight, Dionysos had guided the chapter down a dark path, bending them to a destiny he had long envisioned. Sarpedon, with bitterness and clarity, acknowledged his own blindness to the deceit, lamenting how Dionysos had shaped him into the very instrument of his own doom. It was men like Dionysos, he declared, who caused the innocent to suffer, and in his naivety, Sarpedon had played into his hands all along. Sarpedon issued a grave ultimatum to the Imperial fists, challenging them to succeed where he had faltered, to rise to the occasion and actively combat the pervasive suffering of humanity, or to stand idle and witness the inevitable downfall of mankind. His words, laden with urgency and sorrow, stirred even the hardened hearts of the Imperial warriors. Yet, despite the gravity of his plea, Chapter Master Vladimir Pugh knew his duty, and it demanded the capture of Sarpedon. The Soul Drinker's Chapter Master, however, would not submit to such a fate. In an astonishing act of defiance, Sarpedon invoked the arcane once more, reopening the warp gate. As he moved toward the swirling maw of the Immaterium, Dionysos, once so composed in his manipulations, was seized by overwhelming terror. The realization of his failure at the hands of the dark gods loomed large, and his screams echoed across the chamber. For within the realm of chaos, there is no mercy for those who betray or fail their infernal masters. Sarpedon, undeterred by the philosopher soldier's frantic cries, crossed the threshold into the abyss, dragging the wailing Dionysos with him. The portal snapped shut behind them with finality, sealing their fates beyond mortal reckoning. In the aftermath of these momentous events, the Imperial fists, despite all the bloodshed and enmity that had passed between them, acknowledged the sacrifice of the soul drinkers. Within their apothecarion, towering stone columns were erected, bearing solemn tribute to the fallen. One pillar was inscribed with the names of the Imperial fists who had given their lives in defense of the Phalanx, while beside it, another honored the Soul Drinkers, etched in stone as brothers in death. Though the Soul Drinkers chapter had ceased to exist, their legacy endured, a grim warning to the Imperium. Their story would be retold as a cautionary tale, a reminder to all that the insidious hand of chaos is ever lurking, poised to ensnare those who are blind to its ever-present threat and lead them, unwittingly, into eternal damnation. During the tumultuous era Indomitus, as the galaxy staggered under the catastrophic repercussions of the 13th Black Crusade and the shattering of Cadia, an epoch further marked by the emergence of the cicatrix male dictum, a rift that tore through the fabric of reality. The Soul Drinkers were among those chapters reconstituted by the direct mandate of Robudi Gilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, recently returned from millennia of stasis. The cicatrix male dictum, a vast, galaxy-spanning rift formed in the wake of the 13th Black Crusade and the catastrophic fall of Cadia, represents one of the most profound and devastating events in the history of the Milky Way galaxy. This immense tear in the fabric of reality splits the galaxy in two, creating a nightmarish boundary where the Imperium, home of the Chaos Gods, bleeds into real space, unleashing untold horrors. It has plunged vast regions, particularly those cut off from Terra in the Dark Imperium, into chaos and isolation, as warp storms, demonic invasions, and psychic disturbances wreak havoc on Imperial governance, travel, and communication. The rift has destabilized entire sectors, rendering many worlds vulnerable to the corrupting influence of the warp and demonic forces, while exacerbating the already precarious survival of the Imperium. The cicatrix male dictum is both a physical and metaphysical rupture, signifying the collapse of order, the erosion of reality itself, and the near-overwhelming ascendance of chaos across the galaxy in the Imperium's most desperate hour. This reborn chapter, forged entirely from the ranks of Primaris Space Marines, bore the name of the once-renowned Soul Drinkers, a force that had long since been consigned to the shadows of Imperial history. Their legacy had been buried under the weight of an edict of obliteration, issued by the High Lords of Terra in an effort to expunge all records of the chapter's corruption and downfall. These new Soul Drinkers, however, were born into a void of knowledge regarding their predecessors' tragic descent. Shielded from the dark stain on their lineage, they were led to believe that their founding was rooted in honor, valor, and unswerving devotion to the Emperor, ignorant of the grievous betrayal that had once marred their chapter's name. Their past, instead of a cautionary tale of hubris and damnation, was veiled in the myth of noble service, leaving them unaware of the sinister undercurrents that had defined the legacy of those who came before them. Driven by a fervent desire to vindicate the honor of their namesake, the reborn Soul Drinkers fought with an intensity and zeal that reflected their eagerness to cement their place within the Imperium's hallowed ranks. Among their earliest and most pivotal engagements was the Keprian Reclamation, a campaign launched to recover the isolated world of Kepris, which had fallen under the thrall of chaos cults. The strategic significance of Kepris was amplified by its status as the guardian of numerous sacred relics of the ecclesiarchy, making its reclamation a high priority for the Indomitus Crusade. Tasked with this critical mission, the reconstituted Soul Drinkers played a decisive role in securing a much-needed psychological triumph for the Imperium, bolstering morale across beleaguered sectors. However, in the aftermath of their success, the chapter's unconventional tactics attracted the scrutiny and eventual ire of the Inquisition. It was through this fraught encounter that the damning truth emerged. The original Soul Drinkers had been declared heretics and traitors to the Emperor, their once revered legacy intentionally obliterated from the annals of Imperial history. This grim revelation thrust the new Soul Drinkers into a legacy tainted by heresy and betrayal, burdening them with the weight of a past they had never anticipated. Now, as they navigated the shifting tides of Imperial politics and the Inquisition's relentless gaze, it became clear that their struggle for redemption extended far beyond mere martial victory. They were fighting not only for the Imperium but also to escape the shadow of their forebears' fall from grace. The Soul Drinkers adhered to several ancient and profound traditions that defined their unique culture and beliefs. Honor duels, rooted in their Imperial Fist's lineage, were sacred combat trials where they believed the Emperor and Rogal Dorn would guide the just to victory, testing both strength and virtue. For their most skilled warriors, the sacred blood rites allowed them to consume the brain matter of fallen foes, absorbing not just memories but deep emotional and spiritual insights through their unusually sensitive omophagia, a practice concealed from outsiders. Aspirants to the chaplaincy faced the daunting trial of the scintillating death, confronting an existential terror, the fear of dying with their duty incomplete. This fear, which drove their relentless fight, was seen as far beyond the comprehension of ordinary humans. Many failed or were lost to this trial, but those who returned were initiated into the reclusium, having embraced the eternal struggle that defined the chapter. The origins of the Soul Drinkers' gene seed remain a matter of significant uncertainty. During the chapter's trial aboard the Phalanx, Commander Gethsemar of the Angels Sanguine introduced evidence that his chapter's sanguinary priests had meticulously examined the Soul Drinker's gene seed as part of their investigation into its connection with their presumed Primarch. This analysis aimed not only to determine if there was a direct lineage to Rogal Dorn but also to uncover whether the chapter's fall from grace could be attributed to a latent corruption within their genetic material. To the astonishment of the Soul Drinkers, the results revealed that Rogal Dorn was not their progenitor, casting doubt on long-held assumptions about their origins. The history of the Soul Drinkers is a tragic and complex tale of valor, fall, and redemption, marked by their origins shrouded in mystery, their battle-hardened traditions, and their eventual estrangement from the Imperium. Born of uncertain gene seed, once believed to be descended from Rogal Dorn but later revealed otherwise, they embodied a warrior ethos steeped in ritual and spiritual fervor. Their unique mutation, which allowed them to absorb not only memories but the very essence of their enemies, became central to their identity, binding them to their past and shaping their future. Yet, it was this same fervor that led to their downfall, as they fell into heresy, manipulated by the unseen hand of chaos. Despite their eventual extinction, their rebirth as a chapter of Primaris Marines symbolized the enduring hope for redemption, even as they were burdened with a dark and tainted legacy. The Soul Drinker's story serves as a cautionary reminder of the thin line between loyalty and damnation, a legacy of honor and betrayal that will forever echo through the halls of the Imperium.